Breakthrough in the darkest hour of your life. There are moments in life when the ground seems to collapse beneath your feet. The plans you carefully built unravel. Prayers feel like they vanish into the air, and every attempt to move forward seems blocked. Maybe you've whispered in the quiet, "How much longer can I endure this?" Or, "Why does everything I touch seem to fail?" This message doesn't rush past that struggle. It pauses with you in the tension of waiting, because that is where most of us truly live. The Bible never hides these moments: Job's cries, Elijah's exhaustion under a tree, or the disciples trembling in a storm. Their stories mirror the very weight you may be carrying right now. Together, we'll wrestle with real questions. What if God's silence has meaning you cannot yet see? Could the very pain you hate be shaping the strength you'll soon need? And when all your efforts seem to collapse, who do you become when you have nothing left but faith? Have you ever felt like you've reached the end of yourself? Bills unpaid, relationships strained, prayers unanswered? Sometimes it feels like everything in life is stacked against you. Maybe you've asked, "God, how much longer do I have to carry this?" If that's where you are today, I want you to know you are not alone. And more importantly, your story isn't over. In this message, we're going to talk about the God who brings breakthrough, even in the hardest of times. And by the end, I believe you'll see that the valley you're walking through right now might just be the place where your greatest testimony begins. The weight of waiting. Waiting is one of the hardest seasons we walk through as believers. There's something uniquely heavy about it because it feels like time itself has turned against us. When you're waiting, every day seems longer, every prayer feels slower, and every unanswered moment makes you wonder if God has forgotten your name. The weight of waiting isn't just about the passage of time, it's about the ache of hope deferred. Proverbs tells us, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life." Proverbs 13:12. That's why the waiting season feels so painful, because your heart is carrying a sickness born of delayed answers. Think about it. When you're in crisis, even bad news can feel easier to handle than no news. At least when you get an answer, you can move forward. But when God says, "Wait," it feels like your life is stuck on pause while everyone else is moving ahead. Maybe you've seen friends get married while you're still single, or co-workers advance in their careers while you're still stuck in the same job, or families celebrating healing while you're still waiting for the diagnosis to change. It stings. And if we're honest, it doesn't just test our patience, it tests our faith. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." That verse sounds beautiful, but when you're in the middle of waiting, it can feel like empty poetry. How do you keep believing when every day feels like the same unanswered prayer? The truth is, waiting is not wasted. God doesn't use the waiting season to punish you. He uses it to prepare you. Think of Joseph in prison, forgotten by men, but remembered by God. What felt like wasted years were actually shaping him into the kind of leader who could handle the weight of Egypt's destiny. Think of Israel in the wilderness. What felt like delay was actually God teaching them dependence. And think of Jesus at Lazarus' tomb. He intentionally waited 4 days before arriving, not because he didn't care, but because he wanted to reveal a greater glory. Your waiting is not empty space. It's sacred ground. It's the workshop where God forges faith that is unshakable. It's the place where prayer shifts from being about answers to being about intimacy, and it's the space where your character catches up to your calling. But here's the hard part. None of that makes waiting easy. That's why the Bible doesn't pretend waiting is painless. David cried, "How long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever?" Psalm 13:1. Even a man after God's own heart admitted the agony of delayed answers. So if you're asking the same question, you're in good company. Maybe right now you're waiting for the phone call that changes everything. Maybe you're waiting for a prodigal child to come home. Maybe you're waiting for the depression to lift, for the financial burden to break, or for the ache of loneliness to end. Whatever you're waiting for, let me remind you, God sees, God hears, and God is still writing your story. Your breakthrough may not have arrived yet, but the waiting season is not a wasted season. The same God who was faithful to Joseph, to David, to Israel, and to Lazarus is faithful to you. And when the time is right, the wait will end, not a moment too soon, and not a moment too late. When God seems silent, there are seasons when silence feels heavier than suffering itself. You pray, you cry out, you plead with God, but the heavens seem locked. Your words echo back at you as if no one is listening. It's in those long nights of silence that faith feels most fragile. Because silence makes you wonder, did God forget me? Did I do something wrong? Is he even there at all? David knew this feeling intimately. In Psalm 13 he cries, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" This is not the polished language of a man who has it all together. This is the raw, unfiltered cry of a soul that feels abandoned. And yet, David never stopped crying out. The very fact that he asked these questions shows that deep down he still believed God was listening. Silence doesn't mean absence. Silence is not rejection. Often, silence is God's way of drawing us deeper. Think about a teacher in a classroom. When the exam begins, the teacher is quiet. Not because the teacher doesn't care, but because the test is meant to reveal what's already been taught. The teacher's silence is part of the process. In the same way, when God is silent, it doesn't mean he's gone. It means he's preparing you to hold on to what you already know of him. Elijah discovered this truth on Mount Horeb. After his greatest victory against the prophets of Baal, he sank into despair. He was ready to die under a broom tree. But God called him to a mountain and told him to stand in his presence. A great wind came, but the Lord was not in the wind. An earthquake shook the ground, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. A fire blazed, but the Lord was not in the fire. And then came a gentle whisper, and there Elijah heard the voice of God. Silence is often the canvas where God paints his whispers. In our culture, silence feels like failure because we're conditioned to expect constant noise, constant affirmation, constant answers. But God's silence has a purpose. It strips away the distractions, it empties the heart of false supports, and it forces us to lean not on what we hear, but on who we know God to be. Job said, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." That kind of faith isn't built in the noise of constant blessing. It's forged in the silence of unanswered prayers. Sometimes God's silence is also his mercy. If he answered every prayer exactly when we demanded, we might run ahead of his timing and miss the fullness of his plan. Consider Lazarus again. Jesus heard that his friend was sick, but he waited. To those watching, his silence looked like neglect. To Mary and Martha, it felt like betrayal. But Jesus' delay was not neglect. It was positioning. His silence set the stage for a greater miracle, one that would not just heal a sick man, but raise the dead. So if you find yourself in a season where God seems silent, remember this: silence does not mean God has stopped working. Seeds grow in silence beneath the soil. Babies are formed in silence in the hidden place of the womb. Masterpieces are painted in silence before they're unveiled. And your life is no different. God is working in the silence, shaping you, preparing you, and aligning circumstances you cannot yet see. The silence of God is not the end of the story. It is the pause before the next chapter begins. The pressure that shapes your life has always carried battles. It may look different from age to age, but war has always been with humanity. Centuries ago, men fought with swords and shields on blood-stained fields. Today, wars are fought with technology, cyber attacks, missiles, and politics. The battlefields have changed, but the reality of war has not. In the same way, your struggles may not look exactly like those of the past, but the pressure is no less real. Think about it. Our grandparents faced the Great Depression, world wars, ration lines, and the collapse of economies. They endured the fear of bombs falling from the sky and loved ones never returning home. Today, many of us are not hiding in bunkers, but we are hiding from debt collectors, worrying about the instability of the global economy, watching political systems shake, or feeling the rising cost of living crushing us. Our wars may be different in appearance, but they are wars all the same. For some, the battlefield is in the hospital room where a diagnosis changes everything. For others, it's the workplace where uncertainty hangs over every paycheck. For many, it's the private war inside their mind, the anxiety that won't let them sleep, the depression that drains the joy out of each day, the loneliness that feels like an endless desert. Pressure is not always bullets and bombs. Sometimes pressure is the quiet weight of survival, the relentless strain of just trying to hold life together. Joseph knew what pressure felt like. Betrayed by his brothers, sold as a slave, falsely accused, thrown into prison. His entire young life was a war zone of betrayal and disappointment. And yet, what felt like endless setbacks were actually the chisels in the hand of God. Every unjust moment was shaping him into a man who could carry the weight of a nation's destiny. If Joseph had not endured the prison, he would not have been prepared for the palace. David also lived in the shadow of constant war. Before he was king, he was hunted like an animal by Saul. He lived in caves, always looking over his shoulder. It was unfair. It was exhausting. But it was in those caves that David wrote Psalms, songs that still give us strength thousands of years later. The wars of his time pressed him into the presence of God, and out of that pressure came words that continue to heal weary souls. And here we are today. We don't always face swords or spears, but we face our own battles, war in our finances, war in our homes, war in our hearts. Some people wake up every day with the pressure of choosing between paying the rent and feeding their children. Others wake up to the pressure of living in fear, fear of losing their job, fear of another pandemic, fear of violence in their neighborhoods. Pressure shapes us, whether we want it to or not. The question is not if we will face war. The question is, what kind of person will we become in the midst of it? Some people break under the weight, others bend but do not snap. And then there are those who allow the hand of God to mold them through the fire. Pressure, though painful, can refine us like gold. It's not romantic, it's not easy, it hurts. Sometimes you cry until your body has no more tears. Sometimes you walk through nights that feel endless. Sometimes you wonder if you'll ever feel peace again. But through every war of the past, through every war of the present, and through every war yet to come, one truth has not changed. God is still on his throne, and he still uses pressure to produce strength, endurance, and hope. You may not see it now, but the very war you are fighting may be the ground where God builds your testimony. Just as past wars gave rise to survivors who carried wisdom for the next generation, your struggle today may one day become the strength that helps someone else survive their tomorrow. The war you're in is not the end of you. It may feel like it, but it's shaping something inside of you that will outlast the battle. Holding on in weakness. There comes a point in every struggle when strength runs out. At first, you fight with determination. You pray with passion. You tell yourself, I can make it through this. But as the days turn into weeks and weeks into months, that fight begins to drain you. You start waking up tired even before the day begins. You put on a brave face in front of others, but inside, you are barely holding on. Weakness is a reality most of us try to hide. In a culture that values success, confidence, and self-sufficiency, admitting weakness feels like failure. We're taught to be strong, hold it together, and never let them see you break. But behind closed doors, the pressure cracks our hearts. We cry into pillows. We drive in silence because we have no words left. We collapse in exhaustion when no one is watching. Weakness is not rare, it is universal. The Apostle Paul experienced this deeply. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, God told him, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul didn't write those words as a slogan for a coffee mug. He wrote them from the depth of his own pain. He had prayed 3 times for his thorn to be removed, and God said no. That answer forced Paul to learn a truth most of us resist. Strength is not the absence of weakness. True strength is found when weakness meets the grace of God. Think about Jesus in Gethsemane. The Son of God himself fell to the ground in anguish, sweating drops of blood. He prayed, Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. That is weakness at its rawest form, an honest cry of pain. And yet, it was in that weakness that he surrendered. Not my will, but yours be done. That surrender changed the course of history. Weakness is not your enemy. It is the doorway through which God's strength enters. When you are strong in yourself, you think you can manage life on your own. But when you collapse under the weight, when you finally admit, I can't do this anymore, that's the moment God's power steps in. You discover a supernatural strength that doesn't come from caffeine, motivation, or sheer willpower. It comes from the Spirit of God breathing life into your weary soul. For some, weakness shows up in the body, the illness that keeps returning, the diagnosis that doesn't change, the fatigue that no doctor seems to understand. For others, weakness shows up in the emotions, panic attacks that come without warning, sadness that lingers like a shadow, anxiety that whispers, what if tomorrow is worse? And for others, weakness shows up in broken faith, doubts about whether God even cares. All of these are heavy, and all of these are real, but none of these are beyond God's reach. When you are too weak to stand, He carries you. When you are too tired to pray, His Spirit intercedes with groans too deep for words. When you are too broken to hope, His mercy holds your pieces together. Your weakness is not disqualifying you, it is positioning you, because where you end, He begins. We live in a world that despises weakness, but we serve a God who redeems it. The cross itself was the ultimate display of weakness in human eyes. A man beaten, mocked, nailed to wood. But what looked like defeat was actually victory. Out of weakness came resurrection, and out of death came life. That same power is at work in you. So if you are feeling weak today, don't see it as failure. See it as the very place where God's strength is preparing to rise. Weakness is not the end of your story. It is the place where His power is made perfect. The God who opens impossible doors life has a way of confronting us with doors that refuse to open. You knock, you push, you try every key you know, and nothing moves. For some, that locked door is a job opportunity that never seems to arrive. For others, it's the healing they've prayed for again and again. For many, it's reconciliation with someone they love, a door that stays shut no matter how many times they reach out. These doors become symbols of frustration, reminders of what we cannot control. The Bible is full of stories where God specializes in opening doors that no human hand could move. In Acts 16, Paul and Silas were beaten, chained, and thrown into the innermost prison. At midnight, when most people would have collapsed in despair, they chose to pray and sing hymns. And suddenly, the prison shook, the chains fell off, and the doors swung open. The same God who shook that prison is the God who still shakes the impossible places in our lives today. But let's be honest, before the miracle, it doesn't feel like a testimony. It feels like abandonment. Imagine Paul and Silas sitting in that cold, dark cell. Their backs bleeding, their wrists raw from chains, their voices cracking in pain. Nothing about their situation looked like breakthrough was coming. And yet, it was in that very midnight hour that God moved. Midnight is when the darkness is deepest, but it's also the turning point when the new day begins. Your midnight may look like the end, but to God, it's just the beginning. Impossible doors are not just about circumstances, they're also about hearts. Think of the door of Saul's heart before he became Paul. He was a persecutor of Christians, an enemy of the gospel. No one believed that door could open. But on the road to Damascus, the light of Christ burst through, and the hardest heart was transformed into one of the greatest missionaries the world has ever seen. If God can open the door of Saul's heart, what door in your life is too hard for Him? Sometimes, God doesn't just open the door you've been staring at. He builds a completely new one you never saw coming. Israel wanted to escape Egypt, but they had no strategy, no exit plan. And then God split the Red Sea. No one expected a wall of water to become a path of freedom, but God doesn't need existing doors. He creates them. He makes a way where there is no way. This is why Revelation 3:7 is so powerful. Jesus says, what He opens, no one can shut, and what He shuts, no one can open. That means no government, no economy, no person, and no situation has the final word over your life. The authority of open and shut doors belongs to Christ alone. But there's also a deeper truth here. Sometimes God keeps a door closed because what's on the other side isn't His best for you. We often see closed doors as rejection, but many times they are protection. A relationship that didn't work out, a business deal that fell through, an opportunity that slipped away. It hurt at the time, but what if that closed door was God's mercy shielding you from a path that would have destroyed you? Impossible doors remind us of two things. First, that we are not in control, and second, that God is. When you face a door you cannot open, you are being invited into deeper trust. You are being called to believe that the God who opened tombs, parted seas, and shook prisons is the same God who still moves today. So don't give up because the door is shut. Don't assume silence means no. Keep worshiping in the midnight hour. Keep trusting the God who holds the keys, because when the time is right, the door will open, and when He opens it, no one will be able to close it. Breakthrough is more than circumstance. When most of us think of breakthrough, we picture a change in circumstances. The bill gets paid, the sickness disappears, the relationship is restored, the job offer finally comes. And yes, those are real breakthroughs, but if that's the only way we define them, we risk missing the deeper work God is doing. Sometimes the greatest breakthrough doesn't happen around you, it happens inside you. Think of Hannah in 1 Samuel. Year after year, she prayed for a child. Her rival provoked her, her heart was crushed, and even her husband didn't understand the depth of her pain. She poured her soul out to God in the temple, weeping bitterly, so lost in her grief that Eli the priest thought she was drunk. And yet, in that raw, vulnerable place, something shifted. The Bible says she rose and her face was no longer downcast, even before she conceived Samuel. The breakthrough came in her spirit before it came in her circumstances. That is often how God works. He brings peace before He brings change. He heals your perspective before He heals your problem. He shifts your heart so that even if nothing around you has moved yet, you are no longer the same person. That is the kind of breakthrough the world cannot take away, because circumstances can shift again tomorrow, but when God strengthens your inner life, that strength remains. We see the same truth in Paul's writings. Sitting in a Roman prison chained to guards, uncertain of his future, he wrote, "I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation." Philippians 4:11-12. Notice what he says. He learned it. That means it didn't happen instantly. It was shaped through trial, through pressure, through seasons where nothing on the outside changed. Paul's breakthrough wasn't the prison doors flying open. It was contentment, even while the doors stayed shut. This is the paradox of faith. Sometimes God does change the storm, but other times He changes you in the storm. Sometimes He calms the waves, and other times He lets the waves rage while He calms your heart. Both are breakthroughs, but the latter is often the greater miracle. We live in a culture that measures success by circumstances, income, health, possessions, opportunities, but God measures growth by transformation of the heart. A person can have everything the world celebrates and still be empty inside. Another can have very little in material terms, and yet radiate peace, joy, and strength that cannot be shaken. That is the breakthrough only God can bring. Maybe your prayer has been, "God, fix this situation." But perhaps His answer is, "I'm fixing you first." He is teaching you resilience. He is stretching your faith. He is shaping humility, compassion, patience. Qualities that cannot be manufactured, only forged in the fire. Breakthrough is not simply about getting what you want. It's about becoming who God created you to be. If you only see breakthrough as external, you'll miss the glory of what God is doing internally. The Israelites wanted freedom from Egypt, and God gave it, but they still carried Egypt in their hearts for years. They had the breakthrough of circumstance, but not the breakthrough of spirit. And so they wandered, complaining, fearful, resisting God's call. External change means little without internal transformation. Your breakthrough may come when you finally forgive the one who hurt you, even if they never apologize. It may come when you release bitterness, when you stop trying to control outcomes, when you surrender the plan you thought your life should follow. Those are invisible breakthroughs, but they are the ones that set your soul free. When God brings breakthrough in your heart, you are unshaken by what happens around you. You can walk through storms without drowning. You can sit in silence without despairing. You can face uncertainty without losing your peace, because your foundation is no longer your circumstances, it's Christ alone. So yes, pray for external miracles. Ask for provision, healing, and open doors. But don't miss the greater miracle God may be working right now. Breakthrough is more than circumstance. It is the transformation of your inner life, the shaping of a soul that reflects the glory of God no matter what happens outside. The promise of dawn after darkness. Every night has its midnight hour, the moment when the darkness is thickest, the silence is heaviest, and hope feels most distant. But every night also has its dawn. The Bible says in Psalm 35, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." Those words are not poetic comfort, they are a divine promise. Darkness is not permanent. The night has a limit, and joy is already on its way. Think of the disciples after Jesus was crucified. For them, the cross was the darkest hour. Their teacher was gone, their hopes shattered, their future uncertain. Friday was filled with grief, Saturday with silence. But Sunday dawned, and with it came resurrection. The same disciples who hid in fear became witnesses of the greatest breakthrough in history. Their night turned into morning, their despair into courage, their weakness into unshakable faith. The same God who rolled the stone away is the God who promises that your darkness will not last forever. You may feel buried, but resurrection power is already moving. You may feel forgotten, but heaven has already scheduled your dawn. Night cannot hold back the sun. Look back through history. Every generation has faced its darkness, wars, plagues, depressions, crises, and yet dawn has always come. Empires have fallen, economies have collapsed, but still the sun has risen. Your life will be no different. The shadow hanging over you is temporary. The tears on your pillow are temporary. The heaviness in your chest is temporary. It may feel endless in this moment, but eternity is already breaking through. Isaiah 61 declares, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you." That is your promise. You are not defined by the midnight of your situation. You are defined by the dawn that God has prepared. And when that dawn breaks, it will reveal not just the end of your struggle, but the faith, character, and strength God has built in you through the night. Your breakthrough is not a possibility, it is a certainty. It may not look like what you expect, it may not arrive when you planned, but it will come. The God who authored your story will not leave it unfinished. Morning is coming. Joy is coming. Breakthrough is coming. Hold on through the night, because the dawn is closer than you think. My friend, if this message has spoken to your heart, I want you to know you don't have to walk this road alone. In the comments below, share your name or your prayer request. I read them, and I will pray with you. Together, we can stand in faith, lifting one another up, believing for breakthroughs side by side. Remember, this channel isn't just videos, it's a family of faith, walking this journey together. Final prayer. Father, I lift up every person listening right now. You see their night seasons, their silent prayers, their heavy burdens. Lord, for the one waiting in pain, give them endurance. For the one crushed by weakness, fill them with your strength. For the one facing impossible doors, open the way that only you can. And for every weary soul, let the dawn of your joy rise over their lives. Remind them that the night cannot last forever, that breakthrough is coming because you are faithful. In Jesus' name, amen. As we come to the end of this message, I want you to hear the word of God one more time, because his promises are stronger than your fears. When your heart is sick from waiting, remember Proverbs 13:12. Hope may be delayed, but it is not denied. When your strength is gone, cling to Isaiah 40:31. Those who wait on the Lord will rise again like eagles. When God feels silent, hold on to Psalm 13:1. Knowing you are not the first to cry, "How long, Lord?" and that even in silence he is near. When the ground shakes beneath you, remember Elijah's lesson in 1 Kings 19. God may not come in the earthquake or the fire, but he is always in the gentle whisper. When you feel trapped by betrayal or setbacks, remember Joseph's story in Genesis 39:41. The prison prepared him for the palace. In your weakness, claim 2 Corinthians 12:9. His grace is enough. His power is perfect in your weakness. In your surrender, echo Jesus' words in Luke 22:42. Not my will, but yours be done. And when the doors won't open, let Acts 16:25-26 remind you that at midnight, chains fall and doors swing wide. And believe Revelation 3:7. What he opens, no one can shut. If your heart is heavy with longing, take comfort in Hannah's story in 1 Samuel 1:18. Her face lifted before her prayer was even answered. Learn with Paul in Philippians 4:11-12 that contentment can be found in every circumstance. And above all, trust the dawn promised in Psalm 35. Weeping may last for the night, but joy will come in the morning. Rise with confidence in Isaiah 61. Your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is rising over you. These are not just words on a page. They are living promises breathed by the Spirit of God. They carried Joseph, Hannah, Paul, and countless others through their darkest nights, and they will carry you too. So hold on, my friend. Breakthrough is not just coming. It has already begun in the promises of God that stand unshakable forever.